Sopranos. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Rejoice, rejoice. This is the day. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Rejoice, rejoice. This is the day. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Rejoice, rejoice. This is the day. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Rejoice, rejoice. This is the day. This is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Rejoice, rejoice. This is the day. 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 We love you, virtual walkers.
We want to welcome you if you are feeling weary or feeling energized. We welcome you if environmental justice is brand new to you or has been on your heart for years. We welcome you if your feet are smooth and clean or if your feet are calloused and bruised. We welcome you if your body is a place you feel at home in or if your best days are a kind of uneasy truce with your body. We welcome you if you're a morning person or a night person. We welcome you if you are a Democrat or Republican or neither. We welcome you if you are gay or straight or if neither of these labels describe who you are. We welcome you if you're a person of faith or if you're not. We welcome you if your skin is the color of pine or cedar or walnut or ebony. We welcome you if your disabilities are where others can see them or if your disabilities are harder to see. We welcome you if you're older, and we thank you for your wisdom and your energy. We welcome you if you're younger, and we thank you for your wisdom and your energy. We welcome you if you are a woman or a man, or if neither of those words fit you. We welcome you if you are wounded and healing and trying to recover your strength, and we welcome you if you are feeling strong and trying to figure out where to use your resources. We welcome you if you're transitioning out of something and mourning what is lost, and we welcome you if you're moving towards something exciting and trying to discern its shape, or if you're unsure of exactly where you are. We welcome you if you feel like many of these words describe you, or if none describe you at all. Each of you is welcome here. All of you are welcome here, and most importantly, all of each of you is welcome here.
So this song is one that was written while walking, and we're still working on it and learning it, but we'd like to share it with everybody tonight. So we'll do the melody all together, and then see what we can do with the other parts. Just Somebody say hallelujah.
Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You cannot love both God and money. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You cannot love both God and money. But you shall love the Lord with all your heart. And you shall love the Lord with all your soul. And you shall love the Lord with all your mind. And you shall love the Lord with all your strength. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You cannot love both God and money. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You cannot love both God and money. But you shall love the Lord with all your heart. And you shall love the Lord with all your soul. And you shall love the Lord with all your mind. And you shall love the Lord with all your strength. Where your treasure, where your treasure, where your heart will be. Where your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. Where your treasure, where your treasure, where your heart will be. Where your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. And you shall love the Lord with all your heart. And you shall love the Lord with all your soul. And you shall love the Lord with all your mind. And you shall love the Lord with all your strength. Where your treasure, where your treasure, where your heart will be. Your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. Where your treasure, where your treasure, where your heart will be. Your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. But you shall love the Lord with all your heart. And you shall love the Lord with all your soul. And you shall love the Lord with all your mind. And you shall love the Lord with all your strength. Where your treasure, where your heart will be. Your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. Where your treasure, where your treasure, where your heart will be. Your heart will be. You cannot love God and money. But you shall love the Lord with all your heart. And you shall love the Lord with all your soul. And you shall love the Lord with all your mind. And you shall love the Lord with all your strength.
Amen.
Amen.
Next, is it me?
Our journey today took us across the Embarrass River. The name comes from French explorers who used the term embarrass for river obstacles, blockages, and difficulties relating to log jams and the like. The 195-mile-long stream starts, in part, on the University of Illinois campus by the Bell Building in Champaign County. The only population of harlequin darters in Illinois is found in the Embarrass River. The fish popularly known as darters are small, perch-like fish found in freshwater streams in North America. Some darters are widespread throughout North America, most notably in the Mississippi Basin, but others are restricted to single streams, leaving them vulnerable to extinction.
The history of the United States and the history of American Christianity includes the painful history of colonialism. We are settlers on the land that does not belong to us. We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the hunting grounds and homelands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Miami, and the Illinois. These people have used this land since time immemorial and continue to do so in the present. We offer them our gratitude and respect, and hope in solidarity with them to strive for justice for our planet and for all people.
From the second chapter of Jeremiah. Hear the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, what wrong did your ancestors find in me that they went far from me, and went after worthless things, became worthless themselves? They did not say, where is the Lord who brought us up from the land of Egypt, who led us in the wilderness, in a land of deserts and pits, in a land of drought and deep darkness, in a land that no one passes through, where no one lives. I brought you into a plentiful land to eat its fruit and its good things. But when you entered, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. The priests did not say, 'Where is the Lord?' Those who handle the law did not know me. The rulers transgressed against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after things that do not profit." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Our speaker tonight is Peter Krull, and he's going to go right after we hear from Pastor Nadia from Indonesia. Peter Krull is one of the founders of Earth Equity Advisors, and he'll be talking with us about investments and climate change, among other socially responsible things to think about in terms of fiduciary responsibility. So first from Pastor Nadia from Indonesia, and then Peter will go.
My name is Nadia. I come from Indonesia, which is I live in Eastern Indonesia. I'm really concerned about climate change. It's quite like a big issue. My hometown, because we are living in consists of more than 1,000 small islands, and then is only 8% of land, and 90% is the ocean. So you know that impact. If someday the waters came up, I thought it would be impact also to our homeland. Nowadays we never know, or we can, like which part is the dry season or rainy season is confuse us and also confuse the farmer, and it's like destruct everything, and then it's more hot in my hometown, and a lot of trees is going to dry, and less than fresh water right now. So climate change is not waiting for you for next 5 years, 20 years, but now we have to do something. If you don't do something, what about us? We're gonna lose our homeland. Where should we stay? Where should we run away? Okay, so.
So Peter, will mute ourselves and just turn it over to you.
Great. Can y'all hear me? I'll take that as a yes. All right. Well, first I wanted to thank you guys for having me on. Abby and I met, probably 2 or 3 years ago when we were on a panel at Montreat, which is actually just down the road behind me about, 20 miles or so. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina right now. And we were debating with, I think there was 3 other folks about whether divestment was something that we needed to do or not. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm just grateful that she was able to ask me back for this. So I have a full presentation, and we're going to attempt to do a screen share here. Hopefully this will work, so bear with me 1 second as I do so. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see that. All right, awesome. So Earth Equity Advisors is my firm, which I founded 14 years ago this week, actually. This is our 14th anniversary, and we have been helping people align their investments with their values that entire time. This is one of my favorite photos. I love this because a lot of people talk about renewable energy and the whole not in my backyard because it's not pretty, but I think this is absolutely beautiful. And this powers thousands of homes in France, and I wouldn't mind seeing it on some of our hillsides here. We're going to talk about divesting from fossil fuels and other offenders, and not just about divesting, but what do you reinvest those funds in? We're going to talk a little bit about how this applies to both an institutional account, obviously in the case of the church, but also this is just as applicable to your individual accounts as well. Why do we do it? I think it's fairly obvious. We have families, we love to be outdoors. This is not just about some concept of climate change that we really can't get our hands around. This is about the people we love and the places we love to be. I assume you all know who my friend Catherine is here. She was here a couple of years ago and spoke at one of our events. And this is one of the most important things that I believe she said. She said, "I don't believe in climate change." And of course, the whole crowd was like, hushed and wondering what does she mean by that. It's the evidence. It's the actual evidence. And for some reason, I can't see part of my screen here because I can see my picture here. So I apologize for that. I can't read everything. This is Bill McKibben. He was also here in Asheville a few years ago, right after we got here. And he said, we're not the radicals. The radicals are the ones who are willing to alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere for more money. And I think there's just something poignant about that these guys are pumping CO2 and all sorts of nastiness into our atmosphere. And it really is just to cushion their bottom line. And I think that I have a serious, serious problem with that. And of course, we've all seen all the headlines, and a lot of these are old, but they continue to come. And we need to continue to make our progress. And everything from National Geographic to Sports Illustrated has had a cover about climate change or global warming. So I'm going to give you all a quick definition of what SRI is, or socially responsible investing, or sustainable and responsible investing, or green investing, or whatever you want to label it as. I tend to use socially and environmentally responsible investing. It has a storied history, and a lot of it goes back to people who wanted to see change, and a lot of religious folks have a lot of background in this, from divesting from alcohol and tobacco and gambling stocks, because they didn't believe that it aligned with their values. We go back to the 70s and the Green Movement, and into the apartheid movement down in South Africa, where companies really were divested from, who were doing business with that regime, and eventually got that to fall. It's the fastest growing segment of the investment industry. Right now, it's about 8 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollars in assets in some form of responsible investing. I just came from the Sustainable and Responsible Investing Conference in Washington, D.C. last week, and they expect that $8 trillion, which the number was back in 2016, to go well over $10 trillion on this next report that comes out towards the end of this year. So that's really exciting. You can see the growth back from 1995 through 2 years ago when our last report came out, and it truly is exponential growth and really exciting for everybody in this business. There's 3 main components. There is the first, which is screening, which basically asks the question, what do we want to invest in, what don't we want to invest in? We typically look at things like environmental track record, corporate governance and transparency, product safety, is it a fair and safe workplace, what are international human rights like, and is the company involved in their community? And we can decide one way or another whether to include a company like that or exclude a company. The second step is shareholder advocacy, and this is what we spent a lot of time on last week in DC. I was on the Hill doing some lobbying, pushing our congresspeople there's 2 House bills right now that are trying to limit shareholder advocacy, and from that perspective, the opponents to divestment, the folks who say that we need to continue to engage with these companies, this legislation theoretically would make it that much harder for them to engage. And now, while I'm not a fan, I'm not an advocate for continuing to own fossil fuels and engage with them, because I think that's banging your head against the wall. There are a lot of companies in the middle that we can use shareholder advocacy for to actually make change with. These are the proposals over the past several years that we've seen, where investors use shareholder proposals to push companies to be better. Everything from climate change, non-environmental or non-climate environmental issues, equal employment opportunity, human rights, political spending, and sustainability. And we just continue to see the sustainability climb. But interestingly, we see a lot of political spending. Ever since Citizens United really became law, and corporations and super PACs and all these big moneyed interests have had ability to influence our political process. Investors have been pushing those companies to disclose their spending for both lobbying and for political contributions, and I think this is very, very important. In many ways, I think it's just as important as the push for fossil fuel divestment, just as simply in a different realm. And third is community investment. So making sure that a portion of every one of our investment dollars goes towards a community, goes towards helping an underserved community with banking opportunities, goes towards low-income housing and affordable health care. So divestment, what we're here to talk about, a quick definition, it's basically removing an investment because it's not in alignment with what your values are. And when we don't believe that shareholder advocacy will work. And there are specific cases, such as, let's say, Exxon, who is going to continue to pump oil out of the ground, process it, and sell it, no matter how many shareholder resolutions that we file. Like I said, part of divestment is to align your investments with your values. It's also to shape public policy and discussion. There is, Bill McKibben has been, and 360.org has been huge in getting a public discussion going on about divestment. We have seen tons of colleges and other institutions who've taken that step to divest their endowment monies from fossil fuels. We're currently talking to 3 colleges here in the area about helping them divest from their fossil fuels. So it's continuing to gain momentum. Anytime that we can push this into the public space for discussion, like you guys are doing within the church, is fantastic. But it's not just feel good. It's not just about saying we want to do this because we don't want to own something because it's not the right thing to do for us because it doesn't align with our values. There actually is a financial reason to not own fossil fuels. I brought this up today, so just to give you a little bit of perspective what this is. So BAFWX is the symbol for a mutual fund we use called the Brown Advisory Sustainable Growth Fund. It only invests in companies that have sustainability as an ethic, a product, a service, completely fossil fuel free. So that's the green line, which I think I coded these appropriately. The S&P 500 is yellow, and XLE is what's called a spider. So basically, this is an investment that only owns the oil sector, only owns fossil fuels. And so this goes back 5 years. Again, this is as of today. I ran this morning. And you can see that the socially and environmentally responsible fund was up 100% over the last 5 years. The S&P is up 70%, and oil is down 3%. Who would rather have invested in a responsible portfolio versus oil and fossil fuels? Now, fossil fuels have come up recently because oil has come up in price, but as you can see, it's gone from being down 13% to down 3%. It's not much when you consider a 5-year return. This one is a little bit more difficult to explain, but I will do my best. So these circles represent carbon reserves. So there are about 1,541 units of potential carbon reserves in the ground. Those units are what help to put a price on a company. So in other words, let's say Exxon owns 300 of those units. When the stock is priced, it's priced based on the revenue and the profit that they're making, and it's also based on the assets that they hold. And so some of those assets, or a good portion of those assets, is the oil that they hold underground. And what this graph shows is that of that 1,541 units, only 131 is what can be burned to keep us at the 1.5 degree level. So what happens to that 40% 1,410 other units of fossil fuels that are on the books of these oil companies and other fossil fuel companies in the future if they can't access them because we have climate change regulation, because we have rules that they simply can't pull them out. The stocks of those companies is probably going to go down. And it's going to go down because those assets can no longer be kept on their books. But this is the fun and exciting part. Divestment allows us to reallocate to more sustainable investment solutions. So reinvestment. The things that we really try to help our clients invest in positively is everything from alternative energy to energy efficiency, water, green building and real estate, natural and organic foods, technology specifically related to investment or improvements in efficiencies, green and community finance. These are things that really positively make a difference. And pulling money out is not enough. You have to put it in a place where it's going to make a difference. So this is what we run into a lot of times. What's the hardest part of this? Well, the hardest part is actually knowing what you own. Because the reality is that most funds, most endowments, and most individuals have mutual funds or exchange-traded funds. So all they get is the name of a fund, and you don't know what's in there. But hey, what is it? Why not just taking a look at fossil fuels? What about weapons as well? That's obviously something that we're also highly aware of with everything that's happened recently. Here's some statistics. So there are 3,775 mutual funds with 90% stock in them. And those are ones that any of us can buy right now. Of those 3,775, 1,996 have some form of an investment in controversial weapons. 968 in small arms, and 2,500 of them have a military contract of some sort. It might be to manufacture something, it might be software, it might be some other kind of service. That doesn't leave you a whole lot if you're screening for other socially responsible issues. Other offenders, 1,700 have tobacco in them. 3,100 have animal testing, and some of that is required by law and some of it is not. And another major environmental issue, palm oil, 414 included that as well. So this is what we're doing every day, is trying to find investments that are going to exclude all of these things. I find this really interesting. This is another chart, obviously, where we're using our brown fund, which is green, and the S&P 500, which is yellow. But there's some crazy mutual fund out there called the Divest fund, and that's the red one. And they invest only in gambling, in alcohol, in tobacco, and all the vices that you can think of. And you can see how they've performed relative to everybody else over the last 5 years. It's a little better than fossil fuels, but certainly not as good as doing the right thing. So back to knowing what you own. We list what I call questionable assets. So we'll pull somebody's portfolio and see how much fossil fuel it has, how much agribusiness it has, the Monsantos of the world. Materials and mining. Concrete is one of the biggest emitters of carbon, concrete manufacturing. Fossil fuel-based utilities, defense contractors and weapons, chemicals and tobacco. These are things that we do not want our clients to own. And it looks like it's going through again, so I apologize for that. All right. So I had a church come to me a couple of years ago and say, can you help us figure out what we own, because we have no idea. And so when I got their statement, this is what I saw. Harbor Capital Appreciation Fund, MFS Value Fund, Goldman Sachs Growth Opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And this doesn't really tell you anything at all, other than just gives you some arbitrary name. So I have some wonderful software that I'm able to actually dig a little bit deeper. So about 12% of this church endowment's portfolio was in those questionable assets that I listed. And here's the names that they had: Exxon, Chevron, Duke, Monsanto, and I'll let you read the rest of them. They were nonetheless not happy to see that these were in their portfolio. And they had very little of anything good. I thought that was just as important, that yes, they had all these bad stuff, but what was missing, of course, was the Teslas of the world and the First Solars of the world and the companies that are making a difference. So we also had an environmental nonprofit come to us and ask us the same question, and looked at the funds that they had. And again, they're just arbitrary names that don't mean anything. So we put it through our screens, and we found about 16% was in questionable assets. And again, here we go with Exxon, Oxy Petroleum, Philip Morris, and on down the line. Nonetheless, they no longer own these funds. So I'm really happy that we were able to make this difference. This was about a $2 million account. So that's $2 million that is now investing fossil fuel free. Next steps. First is just simply to resolve that you're going to examine what the holdings are, whether, again, you're an individual or an institution, and make sure that you take this information with you as you go to vote on divestment again. Speak to a professional. Make sure it's not hard, but there's a lot of data, and it's not always easy to find where the information is. Ask a lot of questions. There are no stupid questions. This is something that I think a lot of people are scared to do, because the relationship that a lot of people have with the advisor, what a lot of institutions have with the advisor, is that they know better. And what I've learned after having been in this business for almost 20 years and having started my career at Merrill Lynch is that odds are that they may not know better, especially when it comes to investing with your values. So don't be afraid to ask questions and push. Create an investment policy statement that says we will not own fossil fuels, we will not own tobacco companies, we will not own whatever you don't want to own, and stick to it and review it on a regular basis. And finally, make the time to invest with your values. This is my wonderful team here in Asheville. And just some quick background on us. We focus only on responsible investing. This is our 14th year. We have clients in 22 states. We are a certified B Corporation, which I'm very, very proud of. For those of you who don't know what B Corps are, we are judged as a benefit corporation in terms of how we approach stakeholder value as opposed to shareholder value. So we look at how we treat employees, how we treat clients, where we source products and services from, are we involved in our communities, and every year we get a score based on that. And for the last 2 years, we have been a Best for the World B Corporation, which means we're in the top 10% of about almost 2,500 B corporations. So we're really proud of that. And we're a 1% for the Planet signatory. We're all community leaders, so everybody on, not everybody, but almost everybody, Kelsey just moved to town, is on some board for one of our community organizations. And this, I'm actually really proud. You're the first folks who get to see this, because I just received this award today for being one of the 100 most influential financial advisors in the country. So that's pretty cool. And I think where that comes from is the fact that we're doing responsible investing, and we're really trying to lead the way. So I'm really proud of that as well. Here's our contact information, although I'm sure Abby can provide you with all this as well. Divest Revest actually focuses on people of faith, and so check out that website. The services really aren't any different than what we're doing for everybody else, but it really focuses on people of faith and helping them to align their investments with their values as well. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll let you see my face here again. And I don't know if we're going to do a Q&A or what we're going to do, but I'll leave it at that. I see you all staring at me.
Managed participants.
Sorry,
There, now I can hear somebody.
I was trying to unmute us.
hi Pete. One of the things that we know we're going to have to talk about at General Assembly is fiduciary responsibility.
Yep.
Can you explain that term and how to define that term in a way that's socially responsible?
Right. Fiduciary responsibility means that you can only do what's in the best interest of the institution, of the endowment, of the client. That the only theoretically, the only consideration you can take is the bottom line. When I showed you some of the information on risk, stranded asset risk, which was with those bubbles, when you look at the returns of the energy sector over the past 5 years, I think it can be argued that from a fiduciary perspective, that there's a greater risk involved in investing in fossil fuels than there is in not having it. It's going to be hard to convince some of the diehards on this, but the SEC has said that a responsible investing strategy that excludes certain sectors still maintains fiduciary responsibility. So I can try to find you the data on that so you can have some talking points, but that's a really important aspect to look at this. You know, as long as the regulators are there saying it's cool, then it should be cool. Commissioner Jackson of the SEC was one of our speakers at the Sustainable Conference last week, and it was really good to see somebody who actually is, at the table at the SEC, speaking to this group of people who care not just about value but values in investing. And he seemed to really share a lot of our beliefs. And considering the climate that's in Washington, it was really refreshing. There you go.
Hi. Nice 5-year charts. Do you have more historical data, say comparing S&P 500 to S&P 500, less fossil fuels?
I can pull that stuff up. Yeah, that's easy to do.
There is a difference, right?
There is a difference. Yes, there is a difference. I can't show it to you on demand here, but again, I can send that stuff. If somebody's taking notes of things that I can send you, that would be super. And I can do that, and then Abby or whomever it is can distribute it.
Pete, Mike. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Abby.
Just on the speed, we get a lot of pushback that it takes a really long time for like the PCUSA. I don't even know how much we have to reinvest in something. Can you talk about how long it takes? They make it feel like it's a Titanic ship that will take so long to divest from. So I'm just curious what your comment is.
Hey, Abby, do you remember talking about that on the panel?
I do remember talking about that on the panel.
Since I have a church group, I won't actually use the answer that I want to use for this. But the answer is that it's an excuse. That you cannot simply flip a switch and sell this and reinvest. It's an excuse because they don't have an option, because they don't want to have an option. That's what I've continued to run into. Is there are all kinds of sustainable and responsible funds out there. We've got a really popular one. My good friends out of Green Alpha have a really popular one that is Next Economy, that is pushing for really changing the economy from what got us here to where we're going. And the importance of that is that I don't want to benchmark where our economy is going based on what happened yesterday. I want to benchmark it based on what's going to happen tomorrow. And going back to their excuses, again, it truly is an excuse. If let's say they have $1 billion in assets, just to have a round number, and they probably have somewhere on the order of 4 or 5% maybe in fossil fuels, that's $50 million, that's $40 million. In terms of the market capitalization of, say, Exxon or any one of these companies, it's a drop in the bucket. It is not going to move the market. It is not going to make any kind of an appreciable difference in anything at all. That money is going to go to cash, and if they have a plan in place to put it into a responsible investment fund that focuses only on next economy companies, or puts it just into alternative energy, or they put it into the fund that goes towards retrofitting churches with solar panels and energy efficiency updates. That revolving fund. All of those are great. Those are super opportunities. So basically, it's BS.
So Pete, my name's Rick, and
Hey, Rick.
I want to say first of all how refreshing I find your presentation, and how disappointing it is that I've sat for now nearly 20 years with the folks who are making these decisions in the denomination, and I've never heard anything as clear, concise, and hopeful, and kind of naming what's possible from our own leadership. So one question I have for you is, what do you know about faith-based organizations that are actually leading the way on this? Who are the kind of exemplary folks out there that we could be looking to give examples of this?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I just completely honestly, I don't know the answer to that. Again, I can reach out to some folks that I know and see what their answer is. Obviously, the Unitarians, if you want to consider that, it's not really a denomination, but the Unitarians certainly are a big part of it. I've spoken to the Quakers before, and they're definitely pushing, at least on the weapons side. But obviously, they're just as concerned about climate change as we are. And so those are two which tend to be, obviously much more liberal denominations. But they certainly, I think that's probably where we would start from a taking the lead perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry. Are we back?
Yep.
If I could follow up, just one other quick question. I appreciate what you just said about how easy it is to kind of flip the switch, and that it doesn't make a huge difference in the market. Therefore, it's not hard to find a buyer and convert to cash and then begin to look at our reinvestment strategy, which makes total sense to me. But it's interesting that actually is an argument used against us in the divest. The folks who are against divestment keep insisting that, as one colleague put it with me this week on Facebook, if we win on divestment, it's a hollow victory because it's not actually going to change anything in the overall market. And I just wonder how I've got plenty of things that I can say in response to that, but I'd love to hear what you say.
My response is that they're 100% right. It's not going to change anything in the market, but it is going to change the energy of that money. I think that there certainly is an energy that comes from the way you invest, as metaphysical as however you want to get into it. And I certainly don't want to be running my faith-based community and my faith-based organization on pillaging the planet. It just there's something fundamentally wrong about that, when I could be directing or diverting those funds into something that's making a positive difference. My friend Garvin, who runs the Green Alpha Funds out in Boulder, has a philosophy called Next Economy. Next Economy basically says, as he's initially screening companies, the first question he asks is it making a positive or a negative contribution to the world? And if he can balance that out to at least be positive, there's an opportunity to invest in it. And I can't think of anything positive that the fossil fuel companies are doing at this point. They've gotten us to this point. There was a really good argument by a gentleman a couple of years ago when we were going through this process, and he was very heartfelt about this. He was like, fossil fuels got us to where we are, and we have to be grateful for that. And that's true, but we have to stop at that point, share our gratitude, and then say, now where are we going? It's not a bad thing to say thank you and move on. And if somebody's talking, I cannot hear you. There you go.
Question, yeah.
Hello. My name is Rita. I don't know if you can see me. But so these investments, right? It's as easy as flipping on or off a switch to reinvest PCUSA money. I imagine it was not that easy for you to make the switch from Merrill Lynch to building this company. So, you laugh. So I guess what ethic drives you? What, like, sacred text? What kept you going on those days where it seemed like things were stacked up against you? That's all.
A lot of alcohol. No, I'm kidding. So I left Merrill Lynch in 03, 04, somewhere around there. So I was dating the person who is my wife, Melissa. Melissa is a PhD microbiologist and molecular geneticist. So there's no doubt that I've actually married up considerably. And so we were having just long, very, very deep discussions about environmentalism, social responsibility, things that matter. And about the same time, I had a chance to spend an afternoon with a gentleman named Bill McDonough. And if you know who Bill McDonough is, he is the sort of this world famous green architect who came up with the cradle to cradle concept or the circular economy concept. And that had a big effect on me. And in June of 04, I basically said, you know what, I think this is something that I can do. I think this is something that is going to make a difference. And jumped off the cliff, left Merrill Lynch, and just sort of had my just flew with it, and I've never looked back. I have a great team right now. I've been really lucky in that the people who work for me all just sort of gravitated to come here, and they all believe in this just as much as I do. Lisa, who works out of our over in Charlotte, she actually is a counselor to Methodist ministers, and I think that there's that connection that we have with the faith community is really strong and really important, because this is a demographic that can really change things. I've given talks to Episcopalians before, like I said, the Quakers. We've talked to endowments with the Methodists. Obviously, you guys, we've been really involved with. So, interestingly, I grew up Missouri Synod Lutheran, and if anybody knows how conservative Missouri Synod Lutheran is, it's no surprise for me to say that I've never spoken to them. So, that's my background right there. I hope that answers your question. Influenced by a good woman.
Hi, my name is Matt. Thank you so much.
So that's her right there. So.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering if you could say more about why shareholder advocacy is ineffective in the fossil fuel industry. My impression of the PCUSA is that we've been doing shareholder advocacy for a long time as part of our investment strategy, and so I'm curious why it's so ineffective, as you seem to imply, in the fossil fuel industry.
It's ineffective because the companies, especially the companies that are extracting, processing, and transporting fossil fuels, it's what they do. It is the core of their business. And you can use shareholder advocacy all day, and they're still going to continue to make profit based on polluting the atmosphere. And so I would much rather not own that company from an energetic perspective, but I also believe that there is much greater risk going forward, because as we continue to see coal power plants shut down, I just was reading an article literally while I was waiting to get on this call about how a Colorado utility is going to shut down at least 2 to 4 of their coal burning power plants. Now, granted, they're shifting to natural gas, which is a marginal victory, but it still is a victory in the right direction. And the reality for me is that every dollar that I have invested in Exxon or Shell or any of these companies is a dollar that I can't invest in First Solar or a company that's making solutions possible. And I think that's the biggest part of this.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, I do have one more question.
Okay, last one.
Okay. So financially, right, we can invest our money into these alternative energies, and that's all well and good. But what happens when legislation gets in the way of those infrastructures actually making usable energy? And does Earth Equity Advisors consider that in their portfolios? Like, are you investing in companies that have the okay from their legislators to, or their environmental management offices to go ahead with like solar power or wind power?
It's a really good question, and I think that the market over the last, let's say 16 months or so, I'm trying to think how long it's been since we've had a different administration in. Our portfolios have not lagged at all over the last 16 months. There has been just as much investment in solar power and wind power and alternative energy in general, and in energy efficiency and the other complementary technologies as well. The reality is that train's already left the station, and they can legislate as much as they want, but this is now being driven by the good side of corporate America. The day after the election, I sent a letter out to our shareholders and our base, and basically said, government is no longer going to be the driver of the change. We need to be the driver of change, and we need to follow along and push companies to be the drivers of change. And that's really what's happened. Google gets 100% of their energy from renewable energy at this point, as does Apple. Those are two of the biggest companies. Here in the United States, or in the world, really. While Apple doesn't get all of their energy from renewable resources on the manufacturing side, all of their operations are renewably run. Again, the train's left the station. This is going to continue to happen. Is it going to happen as fast as we want it to, and is it going to happen as fast as we need it to? No. That's just the way it is. But we need to continue to push, and we need to continue to make sure those investment dollars are going to the right places.
Okay, looks like Eric has a question from Zoom, so let me unmute him, and then I think this will probably be our last question, right? So there you go, Eric, you should be unmuted.
Hey, Peter, thank you. You spoke to the thanking the members and workers who have worked in those companies to have gotten us to this point. You've talked about the mission responsibility through investment. Should have been working on this throughout our lifetimes, and about how that unfortunately hasn't been as effective as I think a church would hope for this. I know that the mayors met today in Boston talking about the urgency for moving to clean, renewable energy. Would you speak to, I'm just thinking of the discussions, the pushback that has come at the last couple of General Assemblies when this has come up, and about giving the process time and the science of whether we had to wait 2 years to try to shift the direction of the ship, so to speak.
Well, the good part is that alternative investments or alternative energy and all these things have continued to move forward over those 2 years. It certainly hasn't hurt or hasn't helped the endowment from an investment perspective, because when you look at the performance of, like I said, XLE earlier, it has not done anything relative to the market as a whole. Even if we're talking about just the S&P 500, it certainly has underperformed that, and it's been a lag on the S&P 500. Your lack of not being in there, you're never going to be, or your lack of not having taken action is not going to, you're never going to be able to put a value on that. It's just simply, it's too small in the big scheme of things. And so you can't feel bad, I guess, about not having done it. You can simply move forward and say, this is what we need to do, and go from that perspective. Because we can beat ourselves up, forever about what didn't happen when your opportunity is in front of you. And hopefully we won't see any political wrangling going on this time where you get undermined. I really hope that the people and the presbyteries who want this to happen actually get their say, get their day.
Any last encouragements for those who might be speaking? Oh, sorry. Any last encouragements for those who might be speaking? In the past, it was Friday night late when they had maybe a minute to make their case.
I think the most important thing is what I said earlier, is that every dollar that's invested in fossil fuels is a dollar that's not invested in solutions. That not only speaks to somebody's heart, but it also speaks to the future. I mean, I sounded like I heard children there, right? That's who we're doing this for. I mean, by the time I'm dead, it's really not going to matter much, but it's the next generations where we have to really push to make this change.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we just want to say thank you, Peter, for your time. We so appreciate this time with you and helping us think through how we enter into General Assembly about a week from tomorrow, just about, yeah.
Wow. Thank you. It's been fun. And any other resources I can provide, please don't hesitate to reach out. Anybody who's interested in our business and what we can do for you, reach out as well. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think, do we have a closing prayer? That's it? Okay. So we're just going to close with prayer, and then we will say good night to everyone. So let us pray. Creator and creating God, we give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for this opportunity to join and learn from Peter, and for this opportunity to join together with folks across the United States and California and North Carolina and Boston and so many other places. We give you thanks for the virtual walkers and everybody who is a part of this deep and wide movement that is pushing and hoping for change. Help us to be drivers of change, God. Help us to listen and learn as we go and to push always onward. We pray that your will be done. And we give you thanks for this opportunity to walk together and to journey together toward this General Assembly. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.